Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Majori. I'm the Chief Advocacy Officer for the Collin County Association of Realtors, which means I help with your government affairs. The reason why we're doing this panel today is because we've had a lot of questions from our membership regarding public improvement districts specifically, but also other types of special taxing jurisdictions and assessments. So with that said, why don't we just introduce ourselves? Charles, can we start with you?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Charles Kramer. I am counsel to Republic Title and also counsel to CCAR.
I'm Mark Wolf. I'm the broker owner for Remedies DFW Associates. We've been teaching class on mud PIDs here for the last 3 weeks. I've had virtually all majors now attend. We have our 5th class tomorrow. This is really a hot subject. And my claim to fame on all this was I was mayor in Capel back when the Mud District collapsed and the 2 Rudd districts collapsed and Valley Ranch collapsed, all in bankruptcy. And they were not PIDs, they were MUDs and RUDs, but there's some similarity as well. So talk about that.
You know, I'm Blake Bennett. I'm with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, do educational programs. I see a lot of faces out there. I've been doing educational programs with real estate for about the last 3.5 years.
I'm Abdi Yassin. I'm with Municap. I think we've met previously a few times. We administer the public improvement districts and the tax increment reinvestment zones in the city of Salina.
I'm Carla Stovall. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Salina, and one of my areas that I administer are the public improvement districts.
I'm sitting up here. I'm Corbett Howard, Director of Government Affairs for the City of Salina, and I'm here supporting Carla and Abdi and my friend Adam Marsley, who always puts together these great programs. So thank you, Adam.
Thank you. It's great to have everybody here. It's a great panel. With that said, Blake, take it away.
Sounds good. PIDs, they've been growing in popularity. They're being used more and more. I couldn't think of a better place than Salina to use them because, I mean, I take my hat off to you. You manage a lot up here, probably more than anyone in the state. Wanted to give you some breakdown as to what PIDs are, how you find notice, which has become very important since September the 1st, and then some directions that I see that maybe some improvements that we might be able to do or get ourselves. Put together a little bit of a presentation here. I like to call this my pacifier because without this, it seems like I just can't speak. First of all, what is a PID? A PID stands for Public Improvement District. It works like a tax, but it's not a tax, it's an assessment. Group of property owners get together. That property owners might be a housing addition. It might be a group of retail stores. It might be a developer themselves. And they petition the city because they want something extra. It might be extra police protection. It might be extra trash pickup. It might be help with development. But they petition the city to create a PID. It's a geographical location. It has boundaries similar to what we see with the MUD. And in order to pay for the extra that the city's going to provide, they charge an assessment. They charge an assessment on each one of those properties. It works similar to a property tax. But again, it's not a property tax, it is an assessment on the property. Getting into the big thing that has become a hot topic, it's required notice. September the 1st of this year, you were required to provide notice to buyers if property was located within a PID. Those buyers had to sign off on that notice. It could be either as an addendum or as a paragraph in the purchase contract, but they had to sign off on that, and it had to be recorded before executing the contract. That became very, very important before executing the contract. Trek raced, they got an addendum put together on time so it was ready September the 1st. I will say that the purchase contract changed September the 1st as well, so make sure that you're using the new contract as well because it references this addendum. I'm going to show you an example of that addendum. Here's what it looks like. You can download this thing from Google. Pretty easy. You just type in Trek PID notice, this is the first thing that comes up. You can download it. You can see there's fields that you fill in, and I'm going to walk through each one of these. I'm going to walk through each and every one of them and show you where you can possibly find the information. That's one of the many calls. Happens all the time. In fact, I was a little bit late getting up here because I was on the phone with an agent trying to find information to fill this out and then answer the additional questions. But I'll show you some of the steps that I've gone through in order to get the information. Here are the categories of things that you need to get in order to fill this notice out. You need the name of the municipality or the county leveling the assessment, the property address, name of the PID, law the PID was created under, and the name of the city council or county commissioners court approving the annual installments. That's it. That's all that this notice puts out. That's all. Yeah. I can tell you, hopefully you know this one. Hopefully the property address is not going to be a problem. If not, you need to talk to your broker, okay? You probably need to go back to school if the property address trips you up. Believe it or not, this law that the PID was created under is easy. That's one of the easier ones to fill out. And I'm going to walk through why. It's the other three. So let's start walking through each one. I'm approached by one of you. I get a phone call or I get an email. I think this property's in a PID. I'm not for sure. Great. I'm about to list it, and if it's in a PID, I need to fill out this form. First thing I do, very first thing that I do is I go to the tax statement. Okay, not to the CAD, not to the Central Appraisal District. I go to the tax statement itself. So I need the address. Hopefully, again, you've got that. Go to the tax statement, look on the county tax collector's website, search the address. You're going to be given a coded entry. You download the tax statement. That's public information. Anybody can get that. And then if it's in a PID, it should be there. Maybe. Maybe. Here is an example. I went to the website for Collin County. Here's an example. This happens to be a property here in Salina. I blacked out, redacted the personal information on here, but you can see this gives the information for 2021. Okay? Over here on the left-hand side, these are those codes. We know that these are taxing entities, but it's unit 01, 09, 505, 51, 60. We know that those are taxing entities. It's just what's the code for the specific ones. Well, if you'll slide over, they give you the ability to download the e-statement. That's the actual tax statement that will be mailed out that you need to pay. Click that. Then you get the actual statement. And lo and behold, over here on the left-hand side, it gives you all of these entities. Collin County, City of Salina, Salina ISD, Collin College, Wells North PID. There's my name. And also, it gives me some other information that's highly important. It tells me how much. For 2021, Wells North PID, it's going to cost this property $1,140.33. So I've got a real important part of the information already. That's great. Now, I said sometimes it can be on the tax statement. If the county's not collecting that PID payment, it won't be on the tax statement, right? It's not there. So you got to go searching. You got to go looking, because PIDs can actually contract with outside collectors to collect their payments. So now we're going looking. We're going looking. We've got a specific address, but we're searching for what's the PID name. Talk to your seller. Seller, do you have any PID statements? Because the name will be on there. Some sellers may look at you and say, I'm in a PID. You mean I've been in a PID for all this time? I've never made a PID payment. Well, we're going to find out at closing if you're in a PID then, because your net sheet's going to be a lot different because you haven't been making those payments. Ask the seller first. Hopefully they know. Go to the city's website. Search there. When all else fails, call the city and say, can you please help me? I got an address. Are we in a PID? Help me out. They may, but trust me, she's got a lot of work to do. Trust me, she's covered up right now. I can tell you, and I know what's coming. And you can talk about that in a minute, but I know what direction they're going. She's going to be even more covered up. All else fails, go to Google. Start searching the address. Start searching the address and type in Public Improvement District or PID. You can always call me, and I'll try and bird dog that thing for you as well. It can be difficult just finding out, is an address, a specific address in a PID? But again, start with the tax statement. Now, the law that it was created under, this one is the easiest one to fill out. It's even easier than the address because chances are you're going to have to look up on your phone what the address was. This one's even simpler. Here's part of that addendum. And it says, insert subchapter A, chapter 372, local government code, or chapter 382, local government code as applicable, whichever one created this PID. Huh? I don't know what you're talking about there. This one's simple. From TREC, only Bexar County and Comal County can use chapter 382 of the local government code to create PIDs. No one else can. There's 11 of them as of September the 1st in those two counties. We're not in one of those two counties. Those are down near San Antonio. Now, if you've got, if you've got any property down there, then yeah, you're going to want to take a look at it. Otherwise, a PID, any PIDs that were around as of September the 1st, any PIDs that are outside of these two counties, you're going to use this first one. Subchapter A, chapter 372, local government code, that's what goes in that box. So that one's a good one. We're happy that we don't have to look that thing up. We're set. We've got 3 of the criteria that we need. Now we need to get the last 2. What's the name of the municipality or the county that's levying the assessment? Name of the city council or the county commissioner's court approving the annual installments. This is where my friend here comes in. Okay? PIDs are required to provide an annual update every single year. Provides how they spend money, what they spend money on, who created it, who taxes for it. Okay? We need to get that annual service plan. And again, that's where this comes in. Here is this PID, Wells North, from Municap. You link to it through the City of Salina's website. It's beautiful. The thing that I love about Municap is every single listing for a PID looks identical. All the information is exactly the same and in exactly the same spot. You did a great job with that. Thank you. Starts out with the project overview, frequently asked questions, the annual service plan, and then it comes down to each one of, I'm guessing that these are the phases of the addition. This annual service plan is the one that you want. That's where the golden information is to finish that notice. I will tell you, I was a little bit late getting up here because I was helping an agent find this information. And we were on your website. Right here, frequently asked questions. The nice thing about this is every single PID on his website that I've looked at, this frequently asked question, it's got a phone number to the PID. It's got their phone number on it that you can contact them. That is golden because it also lists if you want to pay it in annual installments or you want to pay it off up front. Here's what you do. Every single one of them, at least for the city of Salina, identical and here's your phone number that you get it all done with. Beautiful, beautiful job. Again, Municap is the best that I've seen. I haven't seen anything else because it's standard. It's like looking up Central Appraisal District or like looking up the tax district. It's all the same. It all works the same. It's all in the same spot. It's beautiful. There can be improvements. What I'm going to say, he can only do as much as he can with the information that the city's able to provide to him. And the city can only do as much as what legally has been provided to them. Okay? So it starts down here, what is required by law for a PID to give to the city to get okayed, and then the city gives that to Municap, and they can provide the information to us. I can tell you, I mean, here's an example. Here is a map of one of the communities that's straight out of the service plan. It's great. It shows you different phases. There's not an address one, and it's not interactive. This is a PDF file. So if I want to look up and I want to find out what phase is this one address in, I have to pull up Google and pull up the map there and then match it up and say, oh, there's the house right there. To me, that's kind of time consuming. That's cumbersome. And this is just me using it. I'm just giving you feedback. Yes, sir?
Let me actually add that, because we actually have a feature on our website that allows property owners or anybody to search a property by property address. So you get the
Sweet. I need to talk to you afterwards, and I need to find out how. Or in fact, if you will do that, we've got access to the web right here. I would love for you to demonstrate that for me.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Great. So that, that kind of takes away some of the info that I'm giving. I'm going to tell you, right here's one of the maps that is in the service plan. I know that's County Road 84. I know that Farm to Market Road 1161's down here, but this is a plowed field. It doesn't tell me anything about where is that house. What do you say about this one? I mean, but again, that's what they were given. I want to see, how do I look up an address, because I want that so much. I could have used that an hour and a half ago. It would have cut down my time, okay? Perfect.
So I've got a question. Are other financing firms, do they have the same features as your website?
Not as comprehensive.
Not as comprehensive.
But you get some of the features, but I think ours has the most comprehensive.
That's
content.
awesome. We really appreciate it.
And then uniform
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, seller's agents, you need to provide notice. We've walked through where every bit of that comes from. Everything. Buyer's agents, be worried, be aware at least. This notice, here's the address of the property. Here's the city that charges the assessment. Here's the law that it was created under. Well, I got some more questions. If I'm a buyer, how much is it? How much is this assessment? I need to know that before I put an offer in. That's going to take some time to look up. Well, it's Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock. We better get that offer in. Oh, we can wait till Monday, right? For me to look up that how much. We can just wait, right? No, you can't. We know how to get it. We can go to the tax statement. That one's a little bit easier. How much? Or you can ask the seller's agent. Next question. What do I get? I know I'm going to be charged an assessment. What do I get? Well, that comes from the annual service plan. That'll show you. Or you can ask the seller's agent. How long do I got to pay it? Those are 3 questions. I heard those 3 questions this afternoon. How much? What do I get? And how long? Big questions that buyer's agents are going to be asked. Notice the common denominator here. Ask the seller's agent. Geographical competency is so very important with PIDs. Knowing what they are, what they do, how much it's going to be, and how long you're going to have to pay. If you can provide that, you're providing a huge service to everyone else that is going to be coming to look at your listing. Now, what if no notice is given? I'm not about to get into the legal questions because there's a lawyer up here. And I'm not even stepping into your realm. I'll let you do it, but there's different things that can happen if no notice is given before closing, and then if no notice is provided and we've already closed. That's all I'm going to say. Is that okay? That's fine. Perfect. I'm not going to get into that thing. One thing that I do want to make you aware of, anytime we get a new technology, anytime we get anything new, we got to be worried. Alexander Graham Bell made the very first phone call. He called. Is it too late? Watson? Yeah, Watson. Watson, come here, I need to see you. Brand new technology. We all know that. What we don't know is that 5 minutes later, he received a phone call informing him that his car's extended warranty had expired. Anytime you get a new technology out, anytime we get a new law out, scammers are going to come out of the woodwork. Okay, they're going to try and take advantage of a situation. I can tell you it's already happening. I got a phone call a week and a half ago or so. Broker called me and said one of our agents had some problems. They had listed a property. They got an offer on the property and then found out, oh, we're in a PID. So we're going to provide notice. Provided notice, extended the 3-day option period. The buyer waited and then tried to extort some money out of them. Quite a bit of money. They represented themselves as a law enforcement agent, said that there was fraud here. Tried to extort some money, threatened to send their license number down to Trek. And it's a hefty sum of money. Be careful. There's people out there. I believe Mr. Kramer is going to be able to go into. These are actually these are the remedies that buyers have. And maybe try and squash some of this. Is it squash or quash? Squash. Squash, okay. I didn't know what legal term we were using. But, okay. Well, there you go. There you go. There you go. Protect yourself out there. Know what buyers' remedies are and are not. Because, anybody can sue anybody over anything. And you get approached, you still may have to hire legal counsel to send that letter, to say stop it. So just be careful out there. Again, I'm gonna turn it over. I don't know if you want to go with Mr. Kramer or not, but
I'm not as tall as Dr. Bennett. That's what I don't like. I got my cheat sheet here. This is the statute. Some interesting bit of trivia you may not know. This law, this new law that became effective September 1st, amended the PID notice. So when we say you've got to give a new PID notice, you may not realize this, but you were actually giving a PID notice buried in the boilerplate of your old Trek contracts. PIDs are not new as of September 1st. They've been around. They're becoming increasingly popular. So the new law is designed to impart better notice to a buyer. We say you're going to have to give a separate document. The buyer has to sign this notice. Before, it was buried in paragraph 6E of your contract. You ever look at 6E and it's a whole page of stuff that's just boilerplate. Because there are various laws in the state of Texas that say a seller shall deliver the following words to a buyer before they sign a contract. So to give notice of a PID prior to September 1st, you had to just have this paragraph. It didn't say anything about the PID. It just said, there may be a PID. You better go check it out, buyer. Well, I think laws are made in response to bad stories, and there were some people that bought real estate and discovered, gee, I've got to pay this extra tax or this assessment. That's not cool. And so they amended the PID law to require this PID notice that you guys now have to deal with. What Blake hasn't gotten into, what Dr. Bennett has not gotten into yet, is that there's actually two notices. The very same notice, but it's done twice. So the first notice, which is the TREC form, is attached to the contract, and it is given by a seller to a buyer before they sign the contract. And then, oddly enough, the law says, and then at closing, or just before closing, seller and buyer will sign the very same notice, and the title company will record it in the land records at closing. So same notice, the form is just the same, but now it's signed by the seller as well as the buyer. It's going to have acknowledgments, it's going to be notarized by the title company, it's recorded. So the first one is the first notice, we'll call the second one the second notice. Here's why this is a freak-out class. The law says that if you don't give that first notice to a buyer before they sign a contract, that buyer has an out. They can terminate the contract all the way to closing. Now here's the great news. If, however, the title company delivers the second notice and it's signed by the buyer at closing and recorded, then the buyer doesn't have an out anymore. That's all gone. But you need to be aware of that. I think and believe most title companies in their search are going to pick up these service plans, which are recorded with the county land records as part of their title search. I believe that most title companies are going to see these PID assessments as part of their data trace tax search or whatever service they're using. So I don't think they're going to get missed by the title company. So although I'm kind of scaring you saying, if you don't do a PID notice before you sign a contract, your buyers can get out of the deal, maybe not. Because if the title company catches it and it's done at closing and recorded, that remedy is gone. By the way, MUDs, which have been around since the 70s or 80s, very same law. So if you really want to freak out about the MUDs, not the PIDs. There's a lot more MUDs than there are PIDs. But you guys, think about it. How many deals have you closed with MUDs and you didn't give the notice before they signed the contract? Did you know in every one of those deals since the 80s, since the statutory notice law came around, that those buyers could have gotten out of those deals? They hadn't hidden out. It's that now it's extended to PIDs. So PID buyers have an out if they don't get that notice before the contract is signed. The scarier thing is that a buyer has at least two other remedies. If they don't get the PID notice before they sign the contract and they don't get it from the title company, they don't get it at all, they can sue a seller for $5,000, up to $5,000. Okay? Now that lawsuit has got a limited length of time. It has to be filed not later than the 90th day after they first get a PID bill. Or if they never get a PID bill and they just learn they're in a PID, they have all these liabilities within 4 years of the date of closing. So you have that. Again, no liability to the seller. That lawsuit doesn't accrue or occur if the second PID notice is done by the title company and recorded. The other thing that a buyer is technically allowed to do under the statute is void the deal. They can say, well, I closed, I didn't get any notice that there was a PID from the seller, I didn't get any notice that there was a PID from the title company, nothing got recorded, I want my money back. And they will literally rescind the transaction, convey title back to the seller, and give all the money back. You don't get a free property, so they could unwind the deal. That'd be pretty dramatic over a liability that might average, $1,200 to $1,500 a year, but it is there. So I'll let you guys weigh that on your own. I do think it should get your attention, and you should be paying attention to Dr. Bennett and doing the right thing. But I'm here to tell you that title companies are perhaps going to save you if you forget. And there's another thing buried in the law I didn't know until I read today. If you, even after this, try your best, you fill out a PID notice and you forget, you got 372 and 382 mixed up. And you put Chapter 382 when Dr. Bennett said put Chapter 372. There is a statute in here that says A seller, real estate broker, blah, blah, there's a whole list of people, shall not be liable if the notice that they try to give in good faith, and they have no knowledge of its errors, is erroneous. So if you give the erroneous PID notice, there's a statute that says you have no liability. But if you don't give it at all, you've got a big risk. You got to, that buyer may want out of the deal. And let's hope that just only the people here in this room know about this law and nobody else there. So, question, yes?
If it's notice is given after the execution of the contract, does that
Remedies go away. The remedies, if the buyer gets it before they close, and the law really says and they close, so there's a bit of an issue there. Then buyer has no more post-closing remedies for lawsuits, rescinding the deed, all of that stuff. The thing that's not clear in the statute, if you really want to go into the gray area, is what happens if you don't give the notice before you enter into the contract and then you realize it, and after the option period's over, after all the buyer's contingencies are over, you give it to them and they throw a fit. They say, I don't want to close. I think a buyer could say, you know what? This is no less material to my buying the house than you misrepresent. You forgot to tell me of an annual assessment? That's material. I think you committed a misrepresentation. I want out of the deal. And they might run to their lawyer and they might have a good basis to get out of the deal on that. But if they don't know anything about it and then the PID notice is part of the closing documents and they sign it and it gets recorded, whew, we're safe. We're all good. All right. I'll sit. Oh, question, yes. All right.
What happens if you have a title company that doesn't issue a closing?
If the title company messes up, then you're closing with the wrong title company.
Every so often we close with title companies that don't prefer.
Well, I can't, no agent, there's no agent that has never made a mistake. There's no title company that's never made a mistake. There's no surveyor's there's no attorney that's never made a mistake. So there is the possibility of error. But I will tell you this very same scheme of buyer can get out of the deal if they don't get this notice has existed in the mud world since the 80s. And I just have not, as an attorney, seen a lot of deals fall apart for that. It's not like the law isn't known. And in the few times you think this is hard doing it, when I get a call from an agent, help me do a mud notice, I'm like hopeless going, the water district database from the TCEQ is stale and out of date. I can't find the data. It's like, oh my God. So trying to get a mud notice is, in my opinion, a lot harder than doing the PID stuff. The PID stuff is like, if you're in the city of Salina, then I would think the town council of Salina is the one that does it. So it seems a lot easier, but that is a possibility. And then we go to our remedies. And $5,000, how much does it cost to hire a lawyer to sue for $5,000? A lot more. So maybe, these are illusory fears. I don't know. I want everyone to be, what I'm really worried about is buyers wriggling out of deals. And then your sellers are looking at you going, how come you weren't attentive to this detail? It's like, this is how you pay attention to those details. So, yes?
I have a quick question.
Okay, Miss Allen.
A Schedule B of the title commitment has all things related to the actual property itself. Do you think that there'll ever be something in Schedule B that will relate to MUDs, PUDs?
There already is. Most good title companies are putting that on. They're not putting it on Schedule B as an exception to your coverage. They're putting it on Schedule C, deal with the MUD. I mean, it may be fancier with that, but it said, property is in the so-and-so public improvement district per our search. So I haven't, Dr. Bennett has told you all these other resources to find this information. Most of the time, if not, I might even say all of the time, it's going to be pulled up on a title search, because one of the things that this law, in addition to all the other outs and exceptions to liability for this law, is if the PID has not filed their service plan of record, then there's no liability. They really want the county clerk to be the repository for the PID service plan, and the PID service plan is the Bible. So if it's with the county clerk and the title company's job is to search the county clerk records, they're going to pick it up, they're going to list it on Schedule C in the very same way that you see on Schedule C MUD notices there. C. Did I say B? Sorry, B, C. I think it should be C. C are requirements, things we got to take care of before closing. Can I get Dr. Bennett back up? Okay. Take over. Unless we have someone else.
Everybody else.
All right.
Well, I can,
Yeah.
okay. Well, the city of Salina has 13 PIDs.
13 active.
13 active. I think we're working on creating another one.
I think that 3 are in the pipeline.
Yeah, 3 are in the pipeline. So right now we're at 13 public improvement districts. For the city of Salina, the public improvement districts are economic development tools that are entered into with the developer to help them with the infrastructure costs. So this is a little bit of how a PID works, of what I work with for the city. So it's not necessarily for city services or anything like that. It's actually providing funding to the developer for them to be able to finance all of those infrastructure improvements. So when a buyer purchases a lot from the developer or from the builder, normally, say the lot price traditionally would be, say, $50,000. And in that lot price, traditionally, it would include all of those infrastructure costs, right, plus the cost of the land, all built in. With a public improvement district, the cost that the builder would be passing on to the homeowner directly, say, would be $20,000, because the $30,000, the infrastructure cost, is actually built into the PID portion, right, that is being paid for over time. So just so we sort of understand the mechanics of the money and how it works, is a PID is just a different way in order to purchase a lot through a builder. So you can traditionally, write a check for $55,000 and buy your lot, or you can write a check for $20,000, enter into a PID or an assessment, and then over time you pay out that remaining balance of the $30,000. Does that make sense? Do we have any questions on that? Okay. So the public improvement districts are for the infrastructure pieces. It's for the streets, the water, sewer, and all of that gets built. And then again, it's passed on to that particular homeowner because that provides, that value, that lot price. The city works closely with the developer in order to create the PID, in order to help this development come online. A lot of times the cities like to do this. One, it promotes economic development, but two, the city can enhance the neighborhood and put additional requirements on the developer to make sure that the neighborhood has some more, more improvements like amenity centers, landscape requirements, sort of make a stronger, more robust neighborhood than some of the neighborhoods that we've seen before. And so the city is all about, again, working with the developer and creating those PIDs. Municap is our administrator on all of the PIDs. We work very closely with ABDI on the annual updates. We work very closely with the Collin County Tax Office. All of the PIDs are run through the county tax office, and everyone receives a tax statement through there. It's all very organized and procedural in nature. What am I missing?
Great. Excellent recap.
I think that's sort of how a PID works at the city side. Yes, question?
Do you have any subdivisions in Salina that don't have PIDs?
I think we have a few.
Carteret.
But the newer ones are typically public improvement districts, and they're quite large in nature, and they have amenity centers and so on and so forth. Okay. But again, you can find all of those on the tax office site. And again, ABDI's site at Municap is wonderful. You can go in there and look at Salina and see all of the PIDs and see the maps and all of that. And of course, ABDI's team does such a good job. If you ever have any questions regarding the dollar amounts or the payoffs and all of that, Municap is always available to answer. Yes, question?
So in most instances, city council decides what areas would be included in the PID. How do the PIDs know where they're going to be PIDs?
It's part of an overall development agreement. So a developer would come to the city and they would propose that they wanted to bring a certain development to the city, and they would be through the development agreements and through those discussions that it would sort of be determined if it was PID eligible or not. Okay, so, yes?
So I'm just curious, does the city monitor the developer or probably the builder in terms of how much they can charge for the lot? Or who determines that?
This is you.
Yes, I can certainly answer that.
Because basically, I think I'm going to have two.
Yes. No,
Yes,
this
sir.
is right up Abdi's alley.
Absolutely. Just kind of goes back a little bit about, as to why PIDs are growing in popularity, particularly with cities. And one of the reasons why cities prefer PIDs, as compared with other special districts, is the fact that in a PID structure, the assessment, obligation of a property owner is known day one. That is determined when the district is created and the assessment is levied. So at that point, every lot type within the subdivision will have a fixed dollar amount, and then that is what the builder would have to pass on to the individual property owner. So that will be determined day one. So anybody that's buying into a PID district knows exactly what they're in for, and then they also have the ability to pay that at any time they choose. They can pay it off at closing and then basically be done with the PID, or they can hold on for a few years and then pay it off, or they can pay half of it, or they can stay with the duration of the PID. So that amount will be determined day one, and it'll be part of the service and assessment plan. Now, with the new law, the service and assessment plan is recorded with the county within 7 days of approval by county. So that information will be available day one to the property owners.
And do you look at any lot premiums? Is that factored into your assessment in terms of what the lot would be worth?
Yes, actually, the statute has a provision in it, and it's going a little bit into the deep world. In a PID structure, the assessment that's allocated to different property classes is based on the projected benefit that they derive from the improvements that are in the PID. So that means if two lots get different benefit from the roads that are built or the water line that's built, then the assessment structure is meant to reflect that difference. So that's why larger, more expensive lots tend to use more of the roads, more of the water line, so their assessment is higher, and smaller lots usually get a smaller assessment. But that equity is built in the statute. It's a requirement.
Is there a set amortization time, or are they all independently assessed at the time they go to City Council for the economic development?
So the original service and assessment plan will stipulate the duration of that particular phase. So that is different for a PID that has just one phase versus multiple phases. So in a PID that has only one phase, particularly smaller developments, the original service and assessment plan usually has about 30-year amortization structure, and then that's it. But if it's a phase development where you have more phases coming in, each phase is usually set for 30 years, but it's phase specific.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that goes back to the information that we were looking at earlier with Dr. Bleck's information, where you have different neighborhood improvement areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, which have different amortization schedule, but all are 30 years within that phase. Yes, ma'am.
This question's going to sound bad when I say it, but I'm asking it genuinely. Is my understanding has always been that the things that fund the city is things like bonds, property taxes, just there's different ways that the city has revenue to be able to put in the infrastructure. So is the need for the PID just because Salina is growing robustly and needs a way to be able to fund those improvements, or what is?
Okay. So cities inside developments don't actually pay for the infrastructure inside a development. That's the responsibility of the developer. We're responsible for putting in streets and putting in water lines that may go to the development, but once we get to that piece of land, that's not our property. It's the developer's responsibility, and that's why the PID is a good tool for them.
It's developer financing. Developer financing. So if you're a developer and you're going to build 200 homes and you need 20 million in capital to do it because the sewers are super expensive and the streets are super expensive, and you have 10 million, you can come to the city and go, how about, I got 10 million, but I need 10 million more to do all the streets and sewers, so can we create a $10 million PID and have it assessed? And so It's not, well, the city's helping them, but it's financing. It would be a developer cost is what it would be.
The city is approving it, but ultimately the bonds are the developers, and the developer is responsible for payment of those bonds. Okay.
Is there ever a situation where the developer defaults?
The PID structure, it's a self-correcting structure. What happens is the PID assessment lien is superior to any other lien. So if you have a property that has multiple lenders, for example, you have a developer that has a lender, the PID assessment, the day it's levied, it becomes superior to any lender's lien. So that protects the developer from defaulting, because if for some reason the developer defaults, the other lenders will step in and correct that one, because that superior lien of the PID assessment will wipe away their status if they don't do that. So that's why you don't see these PID developments not bailing out, because that protection is built in because of that nature of the lien itself. One thing I wanted to add earlier was about the resources. I think you've heard that from September 1 on, this disclosure has become very critical, very important. So the legislature has put a due and really long overdue emphasis on making sure that that disclosure is in. So I think to you, one of the things that I think is really important is to find different resources, like places where you can find information about changes in the law itself, which usually are things that are done through continuing education. I think this is a wonderful opportunity. I've had the pleasure of attending some of these meetings, and I think they're great. And the second thing is to try to find like a default setting tab. Like for example, I don't want to sound bragging, but I think our website does an excellent job in providing you like first-hand information. So if you go there, one of the parts that Dr. Blake saw was just the general district information. There's another section that talks about individual property. So there's a section where you can just plug in a property address, and then that information related to that property, everything about the PID will come up for you. So you'll be able to see the amortization schedule. You'll be able to see the service and assessment plan that is related to that lot. You will know what phases it's in. It also gives you some additional resources about your ability to prepay, whether or not there is another offsetting structure like a TERS and things like that. So there's a lot of information that's available in resources like city websites. Typically, our website is linked with the City of Salina website. So I think it's really, really helpful for you all to kind of make a note of these resources as the law kind of changes. The law, becomes more and more compulsory and then mandatory. I think knowing and then utilizing those resources will always be a great point. And another thing is also, just keep our number handy. When in doubt, just pick up the phone and then call either the toll-free number or the direct number. We'll always be able to guide you through, even if it's a district that we don't administer. We likely will know whether or not it's in a PID. And if it's in a PID, we will be able to direct you. So please always feel free to reach out to Municap, and we'll be able to provide you at least a direction as to how you can get that information.
What are the boundaries, what are the boundaries that you guys cover? Who all are you involved in as far as their information, their data, and being able to go and see this elaborate information?
So we represent most of the PIDs in North Texas area. So I think chances are high that if you pick a PID in North Texas area, that Municap is involved in it, either in helping set it up or in administering it. So I think that will be a good place to start. But again, the greatest place to start for you to know whether or not a property is in a PID is to look at the city's website. A lot of times cities, city finance department, website have either some sort of information about the public improvement districts in the city. So once you know that, either somebody at the city side will direct you to the right, party to help you with that information, or like I said, just feel free to reach out to Municap. We'll be able to kind of guide you through, the next steps on how to go about it. Yes.
I have my computer here, and I'm going to leave it up to y'all, because if y'all say no right now, I'm going to get him afterwards. Can we pull up his website?
Absolutely. I would actually love to do that.
Wonderful.
It's linked, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I can do it here, or you can.
Right. Let's go to municap.com.
You can tell where I was.
So this property.
I'm going to let you go now. This is me. Here, let me blow this up so that you can see the whole thing.
So this is the municap.com site.
Is that better?
And as you can see, districts in Texas are here. So when you go, I think it's probably the best way to do it. Let's start with municap.com. This is what you will see. This is where you will be the moment you hit municap.com. So where you want to go is to district information. That's the first place where you get general information about the districts. And you pick the state, and then within the state you pick the city that you want to look at, say City of Salina. So as you can see, for every PID that is currently active in Salina, you will find information about that PID. So starting from a general overview about which would answer questions like, say for example, let's pick up Cricks of Legacy here. And in this overview, this overview talks about when the district was created. So that first paragraph is about when the district was created. Second paragraph is usually about what the district was created for, what was the purpose of it, what are the things that the district financed. The third paragraph is about the obligations that are existing for that district and what did the city do, or how did the city raise the funds that are needed to basically finance the infrastructure. The fourth paragraph is about the status of the assessment, the mandatory nature of the assessments, and then you find information for the PID administrator as to if you needed some additional information. But that language that's out there in bold is it kind of tells you about how critical it is to disclose this PID information to property owners, because it impacts them and it ultimately affects their property. Non-payment of a PID assessment is the same as non-payment of city, county, school district taxes. So the remedies that are available to enforce collection of city, county, school district taxes are available to enforce collection of PID assessments as well. So it is really critical to help the buyers have that information. So the FAQs are, again, some of the most common questions that you will get from somebody that hasn't heard about a PID or that has very little knowledge about a PID. And I'll say about 80-85% of the questions that you will get about a PID are covered in these FAQs. These are the most common questions that we've gotten. We've been fortunate enough to work with PIDs for the past about 15 years in North Texas area. And these are the questions that we assembled over the years, the most common questions. And again, this will not be exhaustive. You'll always find that exception who will ask a question that is a little bit outside of this. Then the resource at that point is just direct them back to Municap. We'll be able to help. The third thing is the annual service plan update that we just talked about, and then this is the document that basically shows the items that were financed through the district. Again, the introduction section gives you again a recap of what was in the project overview. This section talks about the items that were financed through the PID, the cost of the infrastructure that was financed through the PID. And then you have a section that talks about, again, updates for different sections of the PID. And then there is a budget section that shows you how much is being collected for a given year and what it was going to be used for. So that information is available in this annual service plan update. And a typical budget looks like this. Then you have debt service payments, district administration, and then also all the offsets that are available for property owners. In Salina, one of the things that you will notice are some of the PIDs have an offset called a TERS offset, whereby the cities actually agreed to help the PIDs by taking away some of the additional tax revenue that the city gets from the new development. So the city has not only created a PID and tried to help a PID by raising PID funds, but also committed to use some of the tax money that was going to the city by kind of putting that back to the property owners as an offset against the assessment that they have to pay. So all those offsets that are available to a typical property owner are listed in this budget. And then the other critical component will be towards the end, which will be the detail assessment roll. That shows the amounts that are due to be collected from each property for a given year, and then what each amount is to be used for. So there's a breakdown by property. So we don't list property owner names or addresses. We only use tax. That's to keep a little bit of privacy as much as possible. But you have information on a parcel by parcel basis, the details. This column that you see, the first column that you see is the tax ID. Second column you see is the lot category, whether it's 70, 60, 50, 40 foot lots. The fourth column shows you the outstanding assessment for that year. So if a person wants to pay off their assessment in full, what would that approximate amount be? That's the amount that you see in the fourth column. That's the aggregate principal amount if a person chooses not to do the annual payment and decides to pay it off. And then a breakdown of, so for example, this particular property, this first property will pay about $2,534 for that year. And there is a detailed breakdown of what that is going to be used for, including the credit that they're getting from the city, the money that the city is putting back to the district, and then helping the property owner pay less than what they would under the typical, classic pure PID structure. So this is the annual service plan update that you get, and then this information is updated. This information now from September 1 on is actually required to be recorded with the county. So all these updates are recorded with the county. They're available. So chances are really, really remote that title companies miss this. I can't say for sure, and I think it has happened in the past where title companies missed a few here and there. But at least the legislature, by putting these requirements, they're trying to make sure this information is easily accessible and available to everybody in a public repository format. Yes, sir.
Did you say that there may be circumstances where the city will provide additional funds to accelerate the payoff of the PID?
Essentially what it is sometimes the city, the PID costs will be too much. Or when the PID is structured, there will be some items that will be constructed that have a wider implication than the project itself. When that happens, then the city will basically participate in that process by committing a portion of the future taxes that are coming in towards construction of that line. Like as an example, say the new subdivision that's contemplated needs a 12-inch water line. But the city would want to have a 16-inch water line or a 24 water line. When that happens, the PID property owners can only absorb the cost of that 16-inch that was originally needed. So the city will step in and then have a TERS attached to the PID so that infrastructure can be upsized, and then the cost of the upsizing will not be covered by the property owners, but the city will be using its own tax revenue to do that.
So the individual property owner that participates in that subdivision, in that PID, their exposure is not changed. They still owe whatever they owe.
Correct.
Okay, so I guess where I was going with that is, well, why would you pay it off early if there's a chance the city's going to come in and help out? But that's
those are the things. So when some property owners are interested in paying it off and then they reach out to us, these are the things that we talk about, and then we kind of present the facts to them. And some still choose to pay it off, but it's very, very rare that a property owner chooses, particularly where you have these offsetting credits. Property owners choose to leave that off because, as you mentioned, it probably doesn't make sense to pay it off. Sometimes some property owners are very savvy. What they do is they work with us to try to figure out a way where they can still benefit from the credit that they're getting from the city by paying a portion of the outstanding assessment. They can still do that. They can reduce their share of the money that they're paying. So, but that's the thing. That's the benefit. One of the things that happens when you connect them with the PID people, they're able to provide them that option.
Are there interest rates in these PIDs?
Yes. And
who decides that interest rate? Is that, do they just charge whatever they want, or do you guys say, okay, it has to be a certain amount, or?
Actually, the interest rates are based on the bond interest rate, so that's the market interest rate. At the time the bonds are issued, the interest rate will be based on what the market can absorb. So that's not set by the city or anybody else. It's just a market interest rate for that type of debt that the city is selling for the PID. But there is also another structure whereby an assessment can be set by the city for a reimbursement structure whereby you don't have a bond issuance. When that happens, the statute has actually a limitation as to how much you can charge in interest. There's a cap. That's usually, the really effective interest rate is usually it can only be above 2% above an index rate for years, after the construction is out after year 6. It can only be, 2% above an index rate. The index rate is usually the benchmark market rate. So there's a cap, and that's not a free willy, like you don't get to set that, free willy. It is basically based on a statutory cap.
So that interest rate is in this document, or?
Yes, it's in this document. So in the budget itself, you will see that the interest that's applicable will be discussed in. So right above the budget up here.
And so if a city has a really good record of managing their money, they would have a lower rate.
Right.
Okay, I have one other question too, if you don't mind. In Dallas, some of the PIDs are not based on infrastructure. They're based on police patrol and things like that. And I've known some PIDs to, at the expiration, go back in to the citizens and ask for it to be renewed. Is that a common thing? And it's hard to find information on Dallas PIDs.
Sure.
So,
Are those more maintenance and operation?
Yes, they're M&O PIDs. So,
Do you want
go
to do
ahead.
it?
Absolutely, please. Go ahead.
Okay, so there's two different types of public improvement districts that cities sometimes can look at. I had both types in the city of Bastrop when I worked there years ago. There's a maintenance and operation PID, which is the kind that most likely the city of Dallas has. And then there's just the fixed rate PID,
Yes.
which is the kind that the city of Salina does. Maintenance and operation PIDs, in essence, work a little bit like an HOA,
Correct.
I would say.
Yes.
In that they're ongoing and people pay in, and then there's different types of services or amenities that are provided through that. So it's just another way of, another type of HOA. A lot of times those will be extended before they go through, but these have a lifespan and are established through the SAPs and have a 30-year life, and they're done. So there's no extending. Once you pay it off, you're done.
So Creekside at Legacy, I believe, is not very old. Not that old of a community. Maybe 6. I don't know, guys. How old is Creekside
Right.
Legacy?
2014. But
That was before me.
Yeah.
A newer subdivision.
Okay.
It has a PID now. Did it have a PID 4 years ago?
it did. The PID was established in 2014.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. I was concerned that you buy a house somewhere and then all of a sudden it's in a PID, and then I'd be wondering about, well, what do I do with this increased tax, and can I be in a pre-existing home and then now all of a sudden it's in a PID and now no?
I've never seen that. I don't believe any of them are set up here.
PIDs are invariably started by developers before they build
Right.
homes. I've never heard of a group of hundreds of homeowners getting together and saying, let's create a PID.
Right.
But I guess theoretically you could if you wanted to
could.
really revitalize a certain region, you wanted to pay several $100,000 in legal fees, maybe millions in legal fees, you could do it.
The city could decide that this area is going to be in a PID, right?
A PID is owner driven.
Yes.
So an owner, think of a developer that has a huge tract of land, says, I want extra money for whatever. That's what drives the creation of a PID.
So if an entity goes into a neighborhood pre-existing, and this happens in Dallas, and they drop new water lines, new sewer lines, new sidewalks, new lights, that's not the PID.
I don't know of developers that go into existing neighborhoods and say, we just are going to bring in new sewer. Now, cities do that to repair old sewers. That's a tax issue. That's not a PID issue there. So.
In order to get a PID, you're going to have a certain percentage of the landowners, total number of landowners in that area want it. And then it's not just numbers, it's also either a certain percentage of the total value of the property has to sign the petition, or the total land area. That's why it's easier for a developer to get a PID established, because it's 100%. Once you start building it out, it becomes harder and harder to get a PID established. My mother's worried to death. She lives right down the road on 380. Is a PID going to be created in my neighborhood? I said, number one, you live in a retirement community. Y'all never vote for anything extra on taxes. Number two, no, I don't think that it's going to be very, very difficult to get that number up there. You can have PIDs, yes, in residential communities. You can have it in retail. The Fort Worth Stockyards created a PID in 2003, and it was to revitalize the area. It was for additional police. It was for additional street cleaning. It was for promotion of that district. Only the commercial properties pay that PID. They have to be very specific on who pays. But they got together and they said, you know what, we want to charge 12 cents per $100 of value, and we want this extra from the city. I think their budget is somewhere about $140,000, $170,000 a year. But they get more from the city.
I have a question about that. So when they started the PID in 2003, was it something that was voted on? Did the voters vote on it? Because homeowners don't get to vote on this when they are looking for a home and looking for a community that may not have that additional tax on top of our already high property taxes. So
exactly.
in a situation like that, did the voters actually vote on that, or was it just implemented without people voting on it?
The way that it was created is the existing businesses in the stockyards got together and they petitioned the city for we want more. And so the city took it before the city council and they said, okay, here's how much this more is going to cost. The businesses that signed the petition, okay, we're willing to pay that. It will cost us X amount.
So only the businesses that signed the petition had to pay it?
Within the district, depending on the size of community, it can be 60% of the total number of landowners, total number of property owners, and 60% of the value, or 60% of the land area has to sign the petition to get it through. Am I correct there?
That's 50%. Let me clarify a few things on that one. That's exactly correct. So it always starts with a voluntary petition by the property owners. And the requirement is at least 50% of the land or 50% of the taxable value. So owners that are responsible for that or that own that much have to petition that. Now that is not the end of the process. So once council receives that petition, the first thing council does is set a public hearing to basically accept that petition and set a public hearing for the creation. So, and at that public hearing, everything about the PID, so everyone is welcome at that hearing, and everyone will also be notified about the creation of it. So anybody that's impacted by that petition, anybody that's going to be within the boundary that is proposed for a PID, will receive a notice from the city about that public hearing, and they will that public hearing requirement will also be published in the local newspaper. So anyone that objects to it will have an opportunity to stand before council and kind of voice their concern, and council will evaluate that and ultimately decide on whether or not they want to go forward with it. So it's a very transparent process, creation and levy wise.
Yeah, but like in Dallas, if there's rezoning, a business wants to not be a bar or something, they have to go through rezoning application, right? So is there anything like that? Because I don't think anybody can read the newspaper daily, and Dallas Morning News is going to charge me to read what the charge.
So that kind of the outside posting is not required. However, a notice will be sent to every property that's going to be impacted by that petition. So they will get a mail. The notice has to be in the mail and in the newspaper as well. So everyone that's impacted by anyone that's going to be within the boundary will get a notice about. But that happens actually twice, not just about the creation of the district. That will also happen again at the levy of assessment. So there will be 2 public hearings, and both will be after notice are mailed and published.
But no voting. It doesn't go on a ballot, it doesn't go on a special, nobody gets to actually vote.
No, that ultimately will be a council decision.
Your questions suggest that you guys are catching on.
Yeah. So I know that Mark has a lot to share with us. So.
Well, before you go on, please wait, time out. Before you go, don't close out of that. I want to go back to the interest rate question because my economics brain just starts firing whenever you ask that question. What is the interest rate, say, on the last PID that y'all passed? Just throw out a number. What would be the rate that I would have to pay?
I can give you an exact rate. 3.46% was the most recent bond that we issued for a PID.
3.46%. So if I'm moving into an area and I'm financing $38,000 in a PID or $35,000, you're going to charge me 3.46%. 46%. I'm guessing I'm in a room that y'all probably know what mortgage rates are going for right now. Throw out a number. Low threes. 4.5. Oh, I thought you said 4.5. So you're going to be charged more than that. So it does not pay me to roll it into my mortgage, is what you're telling me. Okay. You're getting a lower rate by going with a PID than you would by financing it, paying it off. with the mortgage, rolling into my mortgage payment.
Most homeowners are just gonna pay those annual assessments. There's no incentive to
Okay.
reduce the debt.
Well, again, it's all based on depending on that interest rate.
You have to live there
the
for
key-
20 years to pay that PID off.
Right.
Most people don't live there.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
But you see, the key in all this is that this option is meant to be provided to the buyer. So basically, they get to make an informed decision. They get to choose that. So if everything works right, and the information communication is live, and you're able to get that information and get it to them, then the buyer will get to make that informed decision, and that's mostly the intent of the city and in the statute as well.
So we live in light farms, so we're in the mud. So I understand in general the difference between the mud and the pit, but why there's more pits coming up now in the new development? And does that impact the buyers in any way? If the buyer is choosing between light farms and creeks of legacy, does the assessment make a difference?
Yeah, if you were to go into one of Jerry Jones's areas where he pays for everything and it's not a pit.
Well, the utility district also charge like 0.5% in live farm, right? So it's also annually, you know.
Yes.
So it's kind of similar to a homeowner, you know, if, I only know this because I'm an agent, right? I look at it, but to my buyer, it's the additional assessment to your property tax, kind of, right? So, the amenities are different, but it looks like the older developments are using more, I don't know.
I can probably add a few things to that. There is some kind of inherent natural difference between a pit and a mud. So the way they operate is different. Like a mud is basically governed by an independent board, whereas a PID is under the city council. So essentially everything about a PID is decided by city council, whereby in a mud structure you have that independent board that's actually responsible for the decision that happens within the mud. The second thing, like a second natural kind of difference between a PID and a mud, is the payoff option that we were talking about earlier. That's available in a PID structure because that PID has a limited life. If it's a 30-year PID, it will end at the end of 30 years. And also day one, you know exactly how much the PID obligation is. That usually is not available in a mud structure because a mud structure, the rate changes as more debt is issued. So there is this natural kind of difference between a PID and a mud. That doesn't mean mud is always bad or PID is always good or vice versa. It's just that they all operate in a different statute, and then they have their own kind of way of going about it. I think that hopefully helps.
But muds can be extended. They could go on for perpetuity, right?
Correct. Correct. A limit, yes.
So if you covered this earlier and I missed it, I apologize for the question. This seems very clear cut for resale and the form that changed, the disclosure that changed in September. What are the builder's obligations when they're selling a new home for disclosure?
It's the same. Any seller,
So
commercial, residential, whatever.
So the tract form that you looked at earlier is now going to be included or should be included on the builder contract?
Yeah, if the builder knows what they're doing, and they have good legal counsel.
And if they don't, does that saying get out of
That
the
may
deal?
give their buyer an out.
So, just one more thing. Okay.
Several things here. One more comment?
No, I was about to show Dr. Blake. He wanted to see the property search feature that I talked about earlier, about the ability to search by property address. So our website, when you go back to that home page, this is where it takes you, and then this is if you want to get information on a district-wide level. The district information was you choose, and then you select the city and then the district. If you want to go on a property by property basis, you can go to the property search feature. And then that property search will allow you to search by property ID, by owner name, by address, by city, or a district name. So you have this option, and then any property that Municap administers is included in here. So that'll be a great resource for you all. I just wanted to point that out.
Let me back up just a little bit here too, because we've been talking about PIDs. You heard the word muds. So I want to go to a little bit of difference, but some of the difference between a mud and a PID. I think that's sort of, first of all, as realtors, mud is a notice form. It's not part of the sales contract. It doesn't need to be part of the sales contract. PID now is an addendum that's part of the contract, okay? MUDs are governed by an independent board. In Coppell, when we had our MUD district, the 5 members of that MUD board, and all MUD boards have 5 members in Texas, not one of them lived in Coppell. 4 of them did not live in Texas. 3 of them lived in California on the beach, okay? Did they care about the MUD district they were making money from, and they were getting a salary, versus in a PID, whether the city council is 5, 7, 9 members, they're not getting a salary, they're there to serve the community, and they can be voted in or out. I'm going to talk about that later on because that has some issues to it. PIDs is for the initial development. You can add on, I guess, later on, but it's for the initial development. It's going to be a 30 or 40 year payout, if you will, $1,100 a month or whatever, times the 30 years plus the interest rate, what have you. You know what it's going to be. MUDs are ongoing. MUDs not only are the initial investment, but they're also the maintenance and continued maintenance of the sewer lines, the water lines, the sidewalks, the streets, what have you. In Coppell, when I got put in this issue, and Mayor, when I first went into office, we had 4,000 people. When I left office, we had 28,000 people. Nobody cared about the MUD when it was 4,000 people. It became a big issue later on. When in MUD, because all 5 of our MUD board members lived somewhere else and they weren't maintaining the property, we began to have sewer line problems and water problems. We would have homes that had clean water that were part of the city of Coppell, and then we had muddy water just next door for the home that was part of the MUD district. And so we as a city had to do something to rectify that issue. That wasn't our problem because the MUD whereas a PID is part of the city government, city council, the MUD is totally separate, can do their own thing. In most places, you don't have a MUD tax and a city tax together. In Coppell, we did. So you paid, if you were in the MUD district, you paid the additional MUD tax above the full city tax, okay? But the biggest issue I see is the government of it all and how it's structured and run. Recently there was an article, CBS News had an article of a PID district in Denton where the people bought from the developer builder and didn't know they were in a PID. Now there was that one-line statement in that 32-page contract that your buyers all sign on DocuSign. How many of them read what they're signing in DocuSign? You know, you're just hoping you get your signature right, you know, and when you sign it off. So they said they didn't know when they got their tax bill and they had this assessment, and the MUD is tax, PID is an assessment, and they all of a sudden got this bill for $1,100 for the year. They didn't know anything about it. So as they began to do research, they found out, in their mind, I don't know what their interest rate was, but they were going to be paying $35,000 for that PID over 30 years, plus the interest rate they calculated to be another $46,000 in interest. So almost $80,000 to pay off that PID over the life of the loan. They were freaking out. Freaking out to the point they were taking legal action against the builder. The builder settled with them and paid for their PIDs for the first 3, 4, 5 years, okay? Because of, quote, not sufficient disclosure. Fortunately, we have these PID contracts that builders are supposed to use now that can make a real difference. The thing that before I go to the other thing, there's a lot been talk about payoff, and that's one of the things I've been teaching my classes in my company. We have a 4th class today, our 5th class tomorrow. The number of agents who are bringing up to me, well, the sales rep at the builder said, why don't you go ahead and pay this thing off and pay the $30,000 now and save the interest that you're going to have. I don't recommend any buyer paying off a PID because hardly anybody lives in their home for 30 years.
There you go.
You know, I mean, so you sell your home in 7 years. Do you think that buyer's going to want to pay you $25,000 for the remainder of the PID? You're sunk. So regardless of the rate, interest rate, and what have you, I would never recommend paying off a PID. But the thing that concerns me a little bit about if there is a concern, I think PIDs are far superior than MUDs and RUDs. And then come back to when I was mayor in Coppell. Not only did we have, this was years ago now, when I had first gone on council, and we had the big Texas economic collapse. Y'all remember that? How many were here in 1987, 88 when you remember when everything collapsed? 9 of the 10 largest banks in Dallas collapsed. All the savings and loan industry, because of new government regulations, collapsed. The oil industry went from $119 a barrel to $19 a barrel, collapsed, and all of a sudden everything was going bankrupt. Every development was going bankrupt. So in Coppell, which is where Solano is today, Coppell was this fast-growing boomtown. We were gaining so many people, you couldn't build the schools fast enough. But all of a sudden, Valley Ranch bellied up, went bankrupt. Vista Ridge, north of us, which is the Vista Ridge Mall, all that area, went bankrupt. The east side of Coppell, our Northwest Dallas County Flood Control District, went bankrupt. So can a developer go bankrupt? You better know it can. We've seen it. But the Coppell Mud stayed in existence. Enough homes were in the Mud District. But then we had the problem with the Mud District over not maintained and taken care of, which hopefully in a city council controlled PID, you would have that, where people were having sidewalks cracking and sewer line problems and all that type of thing. So that was a fun thing at 1 a.m. in the morning one morning when the city council voted that we were going to absorb that mud and take it into the city, do away with that 15 cents per 100 tax that was above that the mud people paid, but then also have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars because the water lines of the Mud District and the water lines of the city ran side by side. They just got their water from different places, okay? It was just a very weird situation that towns all across North Texas have in that, okay? The thing that, if there's a thing that really concerns me on PIDs, is going back to us with MUDs. Guess who would, although we had, as on the city council, we had no control over the MUD. That was independent bodies. But guess who was coming to city council to complain about, what are you going to do about my MUD district? The citizens. So I'm going to transport this to Salina 10 or 15 years from now. By that time, you may have 30 or 40 PUDs, maybe 13 now, 4 more on the way. They become political entities. Everything here is a political entity. And you have these PID districts that are paying $1 per 100. You have these PID districts that are paying 50 cents per 100. What are they getting bang for the buck? It was for the initial development that had been done years ago in that development. And now they begin to come to city council on different things and saying, this isn't fair. You need to do something. We don't like it. We're having to pay more taxes. And everybody around us is paying $2.60 per 100, and we're in these PID or MUD districts, and we're paying $3.10 per 100. We don't like that. What are you going to do about it? And then you've got city council people that live in these PID districts that are caught in the middle because all of a sudden you've gone to single member districts when you get up to a certain size of a city, and so they vie for each other on all of this. So, you know, the PIDs are, if you're going to have it, it's certainly, I don't think there's enough been said. There is no way Coppell could have not had a MUD to develop. We were able to build the first 2 subdivisions, but after that there was no money left to do the next thing. We didn't have the money to put in roads and sewer and what have you. Same with Salina, small town, doesn't have the industrial base yet. It has had to go to a PID type development because people want to move here. And so you've had to provide that. But 10 or 15 years down the road, what do these developments look like, and what do the citizens look like when they've had enough paying all those taxes? So that Charles mentioned, has there ever been has everyone, the title company did not furnish the correct information at closing, and people are angry when they find out they're in a PID or a MUD or whatever, and they come back to the title company? Yeah, we've had several this year from over the Fort Worth area specifically, not some of the reputable title companies, but we have, just like in our market day, we've got a new real estate company on every corner coming in, you've never heard the name before. There's new title companies coming in you've never heard the name before. They don't have the first clue of what a PID or a MUD is. They're out of Canada or out of California, whatever. They come in and open up an office. If I make a recommendation to you, use a reputable title company when it comes to these type of things. So, thanks. Thanks, Mark.
So, does anybody have any questions before we kind of wrap it up?
If you have a lot of PIDs in Salina, are all of the PIDs also affiliated for that subdivision with an HOA? Do they have to have an HOA before they can get a PID?
I think most of the subdivisions do have an HOA here in Salina.
But they don't have to be part of it, it can be separate, standalone from the HOA.
Oh, yes, it's like a separate, it's not a part of the PID in any way. The HOA is a separate.
So here's a new subdivision, and they have certain structural things in the city in phases that they will grow over a 30-year period, and then they can be extended because another phase opens up. But what happens if they want more things and they want a bigger playground or a better swimming area? Can the PID be reevaluated, or would be a new PID that have to be opened up?
You want that one?
I can certainly do that. So one of the things about a PID structure is that once you levy an assessment on a property, the assessment is set. You cannot increase it unless the owner consents to that increase. So that means if they want a larger playground, then the owners have to consent, ask the city to levy another assessment on top of their property. Without their consent, it cannot happen.
But they would just be starting over. The first PID is what it is, and then there would be another PID.
But we wouldn't be able to overlay another PID on top of that without getting homeowners' approval.
Because as time goes on, people don't know what they want.
True. Now perhaps the HOA, right, who would actually have the playground, right? Because that wouldn't really be a part of the PID infrastructure. The playground may be more of a part of something that the developer had provided to build up the neighborhood, and then the HOA is really providing the maintenance and operation for the playground. So certainly the HOA, right, the HOA could work closely with the builder to see if there's any way that they could go ahead and build a new playground. But that would be away from the PID and not a part of the PID. Does that help?
Does the 60% rule apply, like it does to the commercial example you gave to that residential community?
It's right, and that can vary by population size. Is that correct? I mean, it's an economist reading the law, so I'm sorry, Charles. I mean,
it's 50%.
It's 50% across the board.
Yeah,
okay.
50% of the land or 50% of the appraised value.
Right. Or
50.
5-0.
Yes.
I just kind of like to give a plug to the Texas Association of Realtors, because what Mark talked about 10, 15 years ago or more, over time we've had continuous level of problems. Maybe Marvin can talk about this. But we got down to this thing we now call truth taxation. And all this is about transparency is evolved. And as Marvin pointed out, you cannot believe what the problems were with the MUDs many years ago. You have subdivisions that were stranded that were there. 25% of the homeowners were told to note on the whole subdivision and all that, terrible problems. And over a period of time, the association has gone through this process and brought this out in the open. And probably Adam or Martin can tell you more about it. But that had a lot to do with some of the changes that have occurred up to this latest thing in September.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, Olin's 100% right. Our government affairs and lobby team down in Austin does an absolutely phenomenal job. Regarding special taxing jurisdictions, particularly, we're going to probably see some changes coming up in the 88th session. We'll always have our finger on the pulse to make sure we're representing private property and home ownership. It's just what we do. It's part of our spirit, right? So, so thanks for the plug, Olin.
And I just want to say as well, the PID addendum is one of, I think, the first thing.
Yeah.
Or the HOA that disclosure in June that we'll have is the first thing. We're going to have to get more disclosure, because this is, I don't mean this to sound negative, but it's out of control. And everything being developed in Harris County down in Houston has got these PIDs and different things, and no one knows enough.
That's right, and you're 100% right. And one of the things that I hear from my agents a lot is that there needs to be a one-stop shop where you could just look it up and you get all the information on the property, from HOA assessments to PID assessments, special taxing jurisdictions, all of it. And that's something that I don't know if it can be done. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody, but I'm saying that is what has been asked of me to figure out and help bring that message down to Austin. Kind of this, we just had this where HOAs are now listed uniformly by track, right? So, something like that. So
I think the Comptroller's Office actually has started a central repository for all special districts.
Okay.
So there's still a little bit of kind of discretion, applied to whether or not a special district qualifies for that. But right now, majority of district PIDs and TERS are reporting to that central repository. So I think, and then the intent was always to make sure that there is one location where there is kind of a lot of information. And so I think that we're already in progress with that one.
That's great.
And the not too distant future, that will, I think, become very uniform, and then they'll be able to have that list so everybody can go in there and see what PIDs are in what city and in all these things.
And that's what I know that my group wants. So I'm hoping we're moving that way. Corbett, you have anything to add? No?
Does Municap have the majority of the information on these PIDs, or are there other companies?
There are other companies. That's why I was saying we need to have a uniform of like all these different things come together where you can basically go to a state-run website, look up an address, and you can see everything.
But for the city of Salina, it will be with Municap. This is the only administrator we have for all the PIDs, just so everyone knows here. So if you are in the city of Salina and you know there's a PID, it's Municap. And again, we have worked with Collin County Tax Office. A few years ago, they finally got them to go ahead and start accepting those in order to distribute those tax bills. So all of that is now centralized also. Okay. So we've tried to make the process as easy and transparent as we can. You know, we recognize we have quite a few, but the key is getting to ABDI. Okay.
And all are welcome. Yeah, always.
And where does Municap get its funding?
So these assessments are actually self-sufficient, so part of the assessment that's coming in will also cover district administration costs, including Municap, the tax collector, the trustee that administers the fund. So all of those things are covered from the assessments, and they're not a burden of the city.
Okay.